Step into 2024 with confidence thanks to this video's sponsor, Manscaped, where resolutions are met and hairs are neatly kept. As the new year approaches, why not make self-improvement a breeze by keeping your body well groomed? Introducing Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, the ultimate all-inclusive kit designed to help you feel as clean-cut and confident as you should. So kick off 2024 with a trim above the rest and use offer code SKILLUP at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping. In 2017, a group of documentary filmmakers got the consent of New Folsom Prison to film something that had never been filmed before. The prison is a maximum security prison, home to some of society's most hardened and dangerous criminals. It's a place where people pay for what they've done, and it's also a place where many of those people reckon with what they've done. Different inmates do that in different ways, but some of them choose therapy. The group therapy sessions held at New Folsom Prison are very confronting because you're seeing these people face into their past, the worst versions of themselves, the worst things they've ever done. One of the inmates makes clear to another what it is they're doing there. He asks this other person, quote, "Would you be willing to go through this, not to fix it, not to make it go away, but to see it with a new perspective," end quote. So that's what these men are there to do. They're not there to seek forgiveness or some solution to their situation. They're just there to see who they are and what they've done with a new perspective, which, if they're lucky, just might give them some hope for the future. Everyone there wants to hope, but many of them are trapped by the idea that who they were is the person they'll always be. Even though they're surrounded by people who believe in their inherent goodness and capacity for change, they often won't let themselves believe that. That is the essence of the work that takes place in these group therapy sessions, helping people confront their past selves, giving them courage to believe that that is not who they will be forever. For many, their grief and pain is so deep that the only way to let it out is through physical outbursts, with group members ready to restrain one another when the situation calls for it. And it almost always does. It's these therapy sessions that these documentary filmmakers were able to film for the first time back in 2017, and when they released the documentary, they called it The Work. So, what the hell has this got to do with a DLC for a PlayStation game about a Greek demigod trapped in the Norse realms murdering his way through their pantheon so as to protect his son and avoid an ancient apocalyptic prophecy? The answer to that question is quite a bit, actually. God of War 2018 and its follow-up, Ragnarok, released in 2022, was a new saga featuring a new setting, a new pantheon of gods, and a new Kratos. Sort of. It was the same man as before, the angry-faced, bloodthirsty, sometimes horny god killer, but now he was older. He had a sick beard, he had a dad bod, and most importantly, he had a son, Atreus. Kratos now lived his life in hiding from the Greek gods who might seek their vengeance, hiding from the Norse gods who might fear the threat he poses, and most importantly, hiding from himself. From the things that he'd done in his past, from the man he was, and from the man he feared he still might be. If you go back and play God of War 2018, you'll see that Kratos often has this terror in his eyes when he speaks to Atreus. He's scared that he might let the mask slip for just a moment, and that Atreus might see his father for who he really was, or more precisely, Kratos was scared that Atreus might see him as Kratos sees himself, an indelibly blood-stained god of war. God of War 2018 was ultimately a story of Kratos and his son coming together, and that was only possible because Kratos was willing to let himself believe that the man he was today could be a good father to Atreus. If 2018 was about the two of them coming together, then Ragnarok was ultimately about letting go, about Kratos having faith enough in Atreus' goodness and wisdom to trust that he can decide his own fate, both as it relates to the prophecy of Ragnarok and the life he might want to lead after that. But a through line in both of those games was Kratos' fear of who he was and who he still might be. That bloodthirst, that recklessness, that rage of that past Kratos was the reason that this Kratos existed in the way that he did. Every decision made and every step taken moving him away from that former self. What makes God of War Ragnarok Valhalla powerful and important is that it's the first time in this saga that Kratos takes a step back toward who he was. Not so he can again become that person, but rather so he can face who that person was, what that person did, and what all that means for who Kratos is today or might become in future. It is, as you've no doubt heard, a very well-made roguelike, with some novel and thrifty remixing of existing locations, weapons, encounters, and mechanics, all of it expertly doled out over a tight 6-hour runtime. But more than that, Valhalla is therapy for Kratos, where he is forced to revisit some of the most brutal, destructive, and vengeful moments of his past, still trapped in the idea that these things that were him will always be him. In Valhalla, Kratos is surrounded by people who try to tell him otherwise, who believe in his goodness and the change he has undergone, but Kratos will not let himself believe that, as each new run delves deeper into his guilt and shame, making him ever more certain that the best way to deal with his past is to bury it or run away from it. But trapped as he is on that beach, he has no choice but to keep going back, to keep facing his demons, to keep hoping that he might find something that might bring him the peace and the hope that he has long denied himself. That is the work that Kratos undertakes there on that black sanded shore, waking up after each failed run. It's Kratos putting himself through hell over and over again, trying to find a way to reconcile with that past so that he can give himself a future. All of this is delivered in different ways throughout the journey, but the bulk of it happens within a single main quest line that begins when Kratos starts to understand what it is he's there to do. You know what that quest line is called? It's called The Work. God of War Ragnarok Valhalla begins here, with Kratos accepting a mysterious, unsigned invitation to Valhalla, the Norse heaven for those who died worthy deaths. There they feast and fight forevermore, but as we learn when we arrive on that shoreline, there are many different parts to Valhalla, and Kratos' little slice of it is a lot less fun than the others. Kratos' Valhalla is a test of worth that is entirely unique to him, just as it would be unique to others. This portion of Valhalla isn't a physical space, but rather a manifestation of memory, pulling locations, enemies, and events from Kratos' mind and using them as a maze of sorts, one that is reformed and reconfigured every time Kratos enters it. The structure at the beginning and end is always the same, but in the middle part, each door you walk through leads to a surprise location. Will it be a boss fight in Midgard, a puzzle challenge in Alfheim, a moment of respite in Asgard, or a tense combat gauntlet in Muspelheim? You never know, because that's how it goes with roguelikes. And that's exactly what God of War Ragnarok Valhalla is, a roguelike. You will die repeatedly, each new run giving you the choice of abilities, perks, and stats to make each run feel unique, but also meta progression currency that makes each run that little bit easier, moving you toward a conclusion at a steady pace. Playing at one difficulty above normal as I did, progression felt pretty quick and very rewarding. It's been very smartly dialed in to ensure that no run feels like a total waste of time. Even your least successful runs will always net you some currency that will make your subsequent attempts that little bit easier. Finally, you can also just drop the difficulty at any point and there's no penalty for doing so, other than collecting resources more slowly. Roguelites are quite unforgiving. Roguelikes, less so, and Valhalla takes that a step further. It is very accessible and very easy to beat on your own terms. It's also very easy to slip back into. I'll admit that at first, I had almost no recollection of how to play God of War. I was legit pressing the face buttons to try to swing my weapon. Turns out that's on R1 and R2, by the way, but it all came back to me super fast. And within the first 30 minutes or so, I was back and I felt like I'd never really left. It's a testament to God of War's combat that it can be so accessible and yet so satisfying. Given the fairly simple nature of God of War's combat, I was expecting it to all come back to me pretty quickly, but what I wasn't expecting was the way in which the game would push me to utilize more of the total combat sandbox in 6 hours than the entire base game did over 30 plus hours. So what do I mean by that? Remember when Atreus asks Kratos which weapon he prefers most, and Kratos refused to answer because he's all like, "They are tools, a preference would be meaningless," and then Atreus is like, "I like the axe," and then Kratos is like,
"I too like the axe."
Well, your boy Shillup, he likes the axe too. I rode that bad boy as long as I could for both God of War 2018 and Ragnarok. Nothing against the blades or the spear, mind you, but the axe was just my jam. And so that's what I would use, except when I was like cycling ability cooldowns, and then I would just switch back to the axe as quickly as I could. As such, I know for a fact that I did not master the full combat sandbox in God of War Ragnarok. But Valhalla made me realize that not only had I not mastered it, I didn't really even fully understand it. I mean, I did sort of, well enough to be able to finish the game comfortably, but there were so many abilities for the spear and the blades that I just never used, or unique ways to utilize the status debuffs applied by those weapons that I never even knew existed. Or if I did, I probably just use them so infrequently that they just vanish from my memory. Valhalla doesn't let you get away with that sort of ignorance. It kind of does in the sense that you can just use one weapon the entire time, but there are multiple game systems that each encourage you to master your full arsenal in a way that the base game just straight up never demanded. At a basic level, there's a whole checklist thing going on in the background asking you to accomplish various gameplay related tasks, and doing so will reward you some of the permanent currency that goes towards making you stronger. So for example, there's going to be a requirement to use a specific axe technique 10 times in combat, and another that will ask you to use a specific spear technique 10 times as well. That immediately is going to get you switching weapons and using abilities you wouldn't otherwise use, but it certainly does not stop there. There's another set of requirements that involves selecting different abilities when they're presented to you as choices in the rewards chest at the end of each encounter. That is how you get the activatable abilities for your weapons in Valhalla, and so instead of just choosing the same 2 or 3 each time, you're incentivized to always select something you haven't used before. And that process alone really opened my eyes to how much more the blade and the spear were capable of. Then at the start of each new run, you're able to select any of the shields available in the game, as well as any of the Spartan mode abilities, you know, the ones that consume all your rage and make you go Super Saiyan, and there's a bonus for selecting whichever one is randomly highlighted for that run. Finally, and most importantly, there's a series of perks which encourage you to not only use different weapons, but to use them in different ways. So I might be focusing on using my axe this run, but I might suddenly get a perk that massively increases range damage with an even bigger bonus for precision hits. At that point, I'm essentially running a ranged build, using the axe as I wouldn't typically do, because the perk system is encouraging that sort of play. Now to be clear, none of this is particularly novel in the roguelike genre. This is very standard fare. But it's novel here within God of War, because this approach to the sandbox is so different to everything we've been conditioned to over the previous 2 games. There, the best means of encouraging alternative weapon usage was some elemental resistances that forced you to swap weapons so you could bust through a frost shield with your fiery blades of chaos. Most of the time when I swapped weapons, it was just to dump cooldowns, which was actually one of my biggest criticisms of God of War's combat, since that felt very gamey. Ironically enough, Valhalla kind of solves that too, since most runs don't give you abilities for more than one weapon, instead allowing you to select abilities and then upgrade their effectiveness. You literally can't cooldown dump here because you've only got 2 cooldowns. You need to make the most of the weapons you've got and the abilities you've chosen, and that really pushed me to explore and understand this entire sandbox far more deeply than I ever did when I was playing through the rest of the saga. In this way, Valhalla is a swan song for the sandbox, giving you one final tour of it in its entirety before Sony Santa Monica move on to whatever it is they're making next. It's a swan song that's mirrored in Kratos' inward journey as he battles his demons real, imagined, and remembered. And this brings us back to the work.
You do not know everything that I am.
That you were! You've told me of your past, and yes, much of it was horrible. But why should who you used to be matter more than who you are now? Can't you see how far you've come?
Kratos is a man haunted by not only the memory of his past foes, but of what he did to those foes and why he did it. It is, as I talked about in the intro, kind of a central driving force in Kratos' character at this point, the desire to run as far away as possible from the man he once was, so that he might be something better. Running away from your past works to a point, but it still leaves the wound open. It hasn't been treated, and true healing can't begin. There was no healing for Kratos in this Norse saga. There was a realization that he's a better man today than he was in his past, but there was no true reckoning with that past. Kratos may now be a good father and leader, but he still nurtures those old wounds, and because he hasn't healed, he worries that in any moment he might revert back to his old ways and let down all those who now depend on him. That tension is brought to the surface here in Valhalla. At the very beginning of the journey, we learn that Freya, now charged with bringing order to a post-Odin world, has asked Kratos to join her council as the God of War, a title that for Freya means guaranteeing a fragile peace, but for Kratos is an abyss into which he might again tumble. Perfect setup, huh? Ask the man who spent decades running away from his past as the God of War to again become the God of War. And it's an offer that he must consider because it's made in good faith by someone good and with good intentions. Part of Kratos wants to say yes because he can see who he is now, but he can't say yes because despite how far he's come, he's not yet made peace with his past. That is why he accepted that unsigned invitation to Valhalla, and that is why he keeps going back in there every time he falls. He can't put it into words, but he knows that there's a reckoning waiting for him in there, and he knows it's a fight he can't back away from. Here in God of War Ragnarok Valhalla, the fact that this is a roguelike is a rare alignment of theme and genre. The roguelike is, in a way, a form of self-flagellation. Through pain and failure comes realization and success. It's the sort of schooling that would suit a Spartan. It might also be seen as a form of penance, each new death a debt paid, or at the very least, putting Kratos through that which he inflicted on so many others. Above all, for Kratos, Valhalla is therapy, and therapy is not a linear, one-and-done journey of exploration and discovery. It is instead meandering, often revisiting ideas, events, and previous realizations. Progress is slow, often arduous. It's painful, and when the biggest breakthroughs occur, the buzzer sounds. Time's up. Come back next week and let's do it again. That is the conceit central to God of War Ragnarok Valhalla. The idea that Kratos has stuff to work through, and Kratos is doing the work. For us as players of a video game, it manifests as a smartly built roguelike, but a suspension of disbelief might allow us to see it how Sony Santa Monica intended. A group therapy session, one that we have been given rare access to view. And it is a group therapy session because Kratos is not the only story that unfolds here. Mimir too is trying to figure out what a post-Ragnarok existence looks like. Like Kratos, he's given an opportunity for happiness, but he feels unworthy of it. It's no small irony that the two men are trapped in this same conundrum, giving each other the same support and advice while refusing to take it themselves. All the talk you've been hearing about why Valhalla is so good, it's not because it's a well-made roguelike, which it is. It's not because it's free, which it bizarrely is. It's because in 6 hours, it manages to not only conclude the Norse saga, but also the Greek one. It's not a black and white tale of forgiving oneself, but a more complex exploration of what it means to live in peace with one's sin. It's a therapy session dressed up as a video game, deeply unserious in its superficial aspects, but meaningful if you're willing to hear what it's trying to say. Yeah, it's free, and that's cool, but that's not why Valhalla earns its place as an essential, unmissable aspect of this saga. It earns its place because we see Kratos finally facing his greatest and most powerful foe yet, himself. And that is a battle that no one should miss. Make 2024 the year you start taking care down there thanks to this video's sponsor, Manscaped. If you're up to start heading down, then you couldn't have picked a better moment because Manscaped just released their Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, and let me tell you, it's got futuristic tendencies. In the kit is the all-new Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, the most advanced ball trimmer in the history of the human species. Your body hair will tremble in fear at the sight of it, for it knows it cannot withstand the two interchangeable blades, one of them skimming off the top and the new foil blade for a closer shave. The hair can try to run and hide, but it will not succeed, for the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra features dual LED spotlights to provide contrast on multiple skin tones. With that sort of illumination, there is nowhere for those wayward hairs to hide. That's not all though, since the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra also features 3 length-setting combs, plus it's waterproof, making it safe to use in the shower and very easy to clean. The Performance Package 5.0 also includes the nose and ear hair trimming Weed Whacker 2.0, as well as the Crop Soother Aftershave Lotion and the Crop Preserver Anti-Chafe Ball Deodorant. Once they touch your sack, you'll never go back. Hell, Manscaped are feeling generous, and so right now if you grab the Performance Pack 5.0, you also get some Manscaped boxes, very comfy, as well as the Shed 2.0 travel bag. Resolutions may come and go, but a well-groomed you is here to stay with Manscaped's latest and greatest. So start the new year right, because when you look good, you feel good, and Manscaped will help you sculpt the best version of yourself for the year ahead. Get 20% off plus free shipping with offer code SKILLUP at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping with the code SKILLUP at manscaped.com. New year, new you, and definitely a new trimmer. Manscaped's got your grooming resolutions covered. Thanks Manscaped for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.